Most Canadian retirees are sitting on one of the most powerful financial tools available to them, and they are using it completely wrong. They treat it like a savings jar, water it once a year in February, and then ignore it while they focus on their RRSP and their RIF. What I am going to show you today is that your tax-free savings account is not a savings account at all. It is something far more valuable than that. And if you understand what I am about to explain, it could mean the difference between leaving your family $1 million tax-free and leaving the CRA 40 to 50% of everything you spent your life building. Let me be direct with you about what is actually happening in most retirement plans right now. When Canadians reach their early 60s and begin to retire, the pattern is almost always the same. Draw from the RRSP first, convert to a RIF and take the withdrawals. Use the non-registered account when needed. And the TFSA? Leave it alone. Treat it like a plant in the corner. Contribute the annual limit, currently $7,000 for 2025, and forget about it for another 12 months. The thinking behind this is understandable. The TFSA feels like the best account you have. You want to preserve it, so you put off touching it as long as possible. And that instinct is actually correct, but for the wrong reasons. Most people are preserving their TFSA because they think of it as their retirement income safety net. The shift I want you to make today is to stop thinking of your TFSA as a retirement income account and start thinking of it as an estate account. That one change in perspective, TFSA as an estate account, not an income account, is the foundation of everything I am going to explain. Here is why that shift matters so much. Every dollar sitting in your RRSP and your RIF is fully taxable on the way out. Every single dollar. When you pass away as the last surviving spouse or as a single person, the CRA treats the entire remaining balance of your RRSP or RIF as income in the year of death. At the tax rates that apply to large balances, that can mean 40 to 50% of your entire RRSP and RIF balance going to the government rather than to your family. That is not a rare edge case. That is what happens to the majority of Canadians who build significant RRSP wealth and do not have a strategy to address it. Your TFSA, on the other hand, passes directly to your named beneficiaries with no tax, no clawbacks, and no CRA involvement whatsoever. What is in the TFSA on the day you pass away is what your family receives. All of it. That is not a minor advantage. That is an entirely different category of financial planning. So how do you actually build a TFSA large enough for this to matter? Let me walk you through a realistic example so you can see exactly how this works. Consider a couple in their early 60s. Let us say they are both around age 61, preparing to retire. They have a combined RRSP balance close to $600,000 per person, about $230,000 in their TFSA, and some additional funds in a non-registered account. This is not an extreme or unusual situation. This is a fairly typical retirement picture for a couple that has saved consistently through their working years. They make the decision to defer both CPP and old age security until age 70. This is a strategic choice. By deferring CPP past 65, their monthly payment increases by 0.7% for every month they wait, for a maximum increase of 42% at age 70. Deferring OAS adds 0.6% per month, for a maximum increase of 36%. So by waiting until 70, they lock in permanently higher guaranteed monthly income for the rest of their lives. But to fund their living expenses in the meantime, they begin an RRSP meltdown. The RRSP meltdown strategy means drawing down from their RRSP and RF in a systematic and tax-efficient way throughout their 60s, while income from CPP and OAS is not yet in the picture. In the early years of retirement, they withdraw $30,000, then $35,000, then $40,000 from their RRSP and later their RF, keeping their effective tax rate in the range of 15 to 16% throughout. This is disciplined tax management. The goal is not to withdraw the minimum. The goal is to draw down in a way that avoids large tax spikes later, particularly the spike that would come from a large RIF balance being fully taxed at death. Now here is where the TFSA becomes extraordinary. Each year, a portion of those RRSP and RIF withdrawals, the money they are not spending on living expenses, flows directly into their TFSA, $7,000 in the current year, $7,500 in 2028, $8,000 a few years after that. The annual TFSA contribution limit increases over time because the government adjusts it upward to the nearest $500 based on inflation, and these incremental increases compound alongside the investment growth already happening inside the account. This is the mechanism most people miss. They think of the annual contribution limit as a modest number. $7,000 per year does not sound life-changing, but the math is not about any single year. It is about 30 years of consistent contributions growing inside an account where there is no tax on dividends, no tax on capital gains, no tax on interest, and no tax on withdrawal. The compound growth is uninterrupted, and the rate of return inside that TFSA matters enormously. For most people, the money in their RRSP and RF is invested at a rate that reflects the fact that they may need to access it. Perhaps 6 or 7%, dropping to 5% and lower as they age, because the withdrawals are ongoing and predictable. The TFSA is different. If you are treating your TFSA as an estate account, meaning you genuinely do not expect to spend it during your lifetime, then you are not constrained by the need for liquidity or predictable income. You can invest it for maximum long-term growth. The S&P 500 has returned 9 to 10% historically over long periods. Investing a TFSA in a diversified, growth-oriented portfolio at 8 or 9%, rather than the more conservative 5 or 6% you might use elsewhere, is entirely reasonable when the time horizon is measured in decades. In the example I walked through, the couple started with $230,000 in their TFSA and contributed consistently from their RRSP withdrawals over the following decades. With an 8% rate of return inside the TFSA and zero tax drag on that growth, the balance grew to $2.3 million by the time the RIF was fully wound down. $2.3 million, starting from $230,000, tax-free, transferred directly to their beneficiaries with no CRA involvement. That is what the estate account strategy produces when it is followed with discipline. Now let me clarify the withdrawal strategy around this, because the order in which you draw from your accounts is not flexible. It matters enormously for the outcome. The sequence that makes this work is this. Draw from your RRSP and RF first throughout your 60s and early 70s. Manage the withdrawals to keep your effective tax rate stable and predictable, avoiding large spikes. When you have years of unusual or elevated spending, a major renovation, a vehicle replacement, a significant anniversary trip, a family event, draw from your non-registered account to cover the difference rather than increasing your RIF withdrawal and generating unnecessary taxable income. Your TFSA is the last account you touch, and you only draw from it in specific situations where doing so provides a direct tax advantage. There are 3 situations where drawing from your TFSA makes strategic sense. The first is when a large RRSP or RIF withdrawal in a given year would push you into a higher tax bracket. In that case, pulling back the RRSP withdrawal slightly and supplementing with TFSA income keeps your tax rate lower without reducing your total spendable income. The second is when your RRSP or RIF withdrawals are approaching the level where the OAS recovery tax, the clawback, would begin. For 2026, that threshold is $93,454. If your income is approaching that number, reducing your RRSP withdrawal and bringing in TFSA income instead lets you protect your OAS. The third is exactly the kind of irregular expense described above. A year of genuinely elevated spending where using the TFSA is smarter than increasing taxable withdrawals. Outside of those 3 situations, the goal is to leave the TFSA alone, let it grow, and treat it as if you are building a legacy rather than managing a budget. This is not a passive approach. It is a deliberate, active choice to direct money into the account that is most powerful for your beneficiaries, invested at the highest responsible rate of return available to you, and resist the temptation to tap into it for convenience. There is one practical point about the TFSA that is worth emphasizing directly. Many people who have their TFSA sitting in a high-interest savings account believe they are being responsible because the account is described with the word savings. This is one of the most costly misunderstandings in Canadian retirement planning. The word savings in tax-free savings account refers to the tax status of the account, not to how the money inside it should be invested. If you are treating the TFSA as an estate account with a decades-long time horizon, holding it in a savings account earning 2 or 3% means foregoing an enormous amount of compound growth. The money should be invested in equities, ETFs, index funds, or dividend growth stocks, something designed to generate 8 to 10% annually over the long term. The tax-free compounding advantage of the TFSA is only as powerful as the rate of return you achieve inside it. Let me also be clear that not every household will follow this strategy identically. If your RRSP balance is modest and your retirement spending is higher relative to your income sources, you may find that your TFSA is needed as a regular income supplement rather than a pure estate vehicle. There is no shame in that. The TFSA is yours to use as your situation requires. But if you are in a position where your RRSP and RIF withdrawals, combined with CPP and OAS, are sufficient to cover your living expenses, and you find yourself banking the surplus into your TFSA year after year, you are already on the right path. The strategy is simply to be intentional about it. Invest the TFSA aggressively. Commit to not drawing from it except in the 3 situations described. Name your beneficiaries clearly and directly on the account, and let the math work for you over time. The outcome, when this strategy is followed with consistency, is a TFSA worth well over $1 million, and in many cases significantly more, that transfers to your family completely outside of your estate, without probate, without tax, and without CRA involvement of any kind. Your RRSP built your retirement. Your TFSA, managed correctly, builds your legacy. If you are currently approaching retirement and have not yet had a conversation with a financial planner about your TFSA withdrawal strategy and investment approach, that conversation is worth having now. The decisions you make in the early years of retirement about which accounts to draw from and how to invest what remains set the trajectory for everything that follows. Let me address something that many people wonder about but rarely ask directly. What happens to the TFSA strategy if markets underperform? What if that 8 or 9% rate of return does not materialize, and instead you see flat or negative growth over a stretch of years? This is a fair concern, and it is one that separates disciplined long-term investors from those who abandon a strategy at exactly the wrong moment. Over any 30-year period in the history of the S&P 500, the annualized return has been positive. That does not mean every individual year is positive. It means that the average across the full period holds. When markets fall, the TFSA investor with a decades-long horizon is not in a position where they are forced to sell. They are not drawing from the TFSA for income. The account sits, the positions recover, and the compounding continues. This is the exact opposite of the situation in an RRSP or RIF, where minimum withdrawal rules force you to take income regardless of market conditions, potentially selling investments at a loss to generate the cash required. This is yet another structural advantage of the TFSA as an estate account. Because you are not required to make withdrawals, you have complete control over timing. You never have to sell at the bottom. You can ride out downturns with patience and let the long-term return trajectory work in your favor. For an account that is intended to grow over 20 or 30 years and then transfer to beneficiaries, this flexibility is enormously valuable. There is also the question of asset allocation within the TFSA. Many financial advisors, when speaking generally about retirement portfolios, will suggest shifting toward more conservative, income-producing investments as a person ages: bonds, GICs, dividend-focused equities. This advice makes sense for accounts from which you are drawing income. It does not necessarily apply to a TFSA that you genuinely intend never to touch. If the TFSA is an estate account, your time horizon is not your own remaining lifespan. It is your children's or grandchildren's lifespan. With that in mind, maintaining a growth-oriented equity allocation inside the TFSA for as long as possible is the mathematically sound approach, even if it feels counterintuitive at age 75 or 80. Leave your question in the comments below. Are you planning to draw from your TFSA during retirement? Or are you thinking of treating it as an estate account and passing it on to your beneficiaries? Every comment is read and responses are given. Share this with anyone in your life who is approaching retirement and has not yet thought through this strategy. It may be the most valuable financial conversation they have this year. There is one more layer to this strategy that is worth understanding before we close, and it involves the annual contribution limit itself. Many Canadians think of the TFSA contribution room as a fixed, static number, $7,000 this year, full stop. What they overlook is that the contribution limit increases over time, and it also carries forward. If you have never contributed the full annual limit, or if you withdrew from your TFSA in a previous year, that room is not lost. It is added to your available contribution room in the following calendar year. For someone who is entering retirement with unused contribution room built up over several years, the ability to deposit a larger lump sum in a single year, say from the proceeds of a RIF withdrawal that exceeds living expenses, can be enormously powerful. It accelerates the growth inside the account significantly compared to spreading contributions in small annual amounts. This is particularly relevant during the RRSP meltdown phase of retirement. If your RRSP or RF withdrawals in a given year are substantially larger than your spending, you may have the opportunity to contribute not just the current year's limit, but also a portion of unused room from prior years. Working with a financial planner to identify exactly how much room you have available and how to deploy it efficiently can add years of compounding growth to your TFSA balance. It is also worth addressing a question that comes up frequently in conversations about this strategy, which is whether it is better to prioritize paying down debt or contributing to the TFSA during the years leading up to retirement. The general principle is that if the after-tax cost of your debt is lower than the expected rate of return inside your TFSA, the TFSA contribution is the better financial decision. For someone carrying a mortgage at 4 or 5% and investing their TFSA in an equity portfolio targeting 8 to 9%, the math favors the TFSA. But every situation is different, and the comfort level of carrying debt into retirement is also a personal factor that has to be weighed alongside the pure numbers. Finally, for those of you who are managing a TFSA on behalf of an elderly parent or helping a spouse navigate retirement planning, the beneficiary designation on the TFSA deserves specific attention. In most provinces, you can name your spouse or common law partner as a successor holder rather than simply a beneficiary. The successor holder designation is significantly more powerful. It means that when you pass away, your spouse does not simply receive the money from your TFSA as a lump sum. They actually take over the account itself, with all of its contribution room and its investment history intact, without it affecting their own TFSA contribution room. This is the cleanest and most tax-efficient transfer possible between spouses, and it is something that many Canadians either do not know about or have not set up correctly on their account paperwork. If you are married or in a common law relationship, check your TFSA account today to confirm that your successor holder designation is in place. If it is not there, add it. This one administrative step protects everything you have built inside that account and ensures it transfers to your spouse exactly as intended. The TFSA is the most flexible, most tax-efficient account available to Canadian retirees. Used strategically, invested for growth, preserved as long as possible, and structured to pass cleanly to the right people, it becomes the foundation of a legacy that can outlast a single lifetime of saving. The retirees who understand this and act on it consistently are the ones whose families inherit real, lasting wealth without the CRA taking the largest share. This is Canada Pension Vault.